The first sound she heard was the click of a car door locking behind her. Too close, too deliberate. Emily Carter stopped mid-step under the flickering streetlight, her breath catching in her throat. The night air along Riverfront Drive smelled like cold metal and old water, the kind of smell that never quite left towns that used to matter. Her keys were already threaded between her fingers, knuckles whitening. Pulse hammering so hard she could feel it in her ears. She didn't turn around. She'd learned that much. A shadow stretched across the cracked pavement beside her. Another step. Slow, heavy, measured. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. That was worse. "Hey," a voice called out from behind her. Male. Low. Calm, in a way that didn't belong on an empty street at this hour. "You dropped something." Emily swallowed. Her apartment was less than 2 blocks away. 2 blocks that suddenly felt like miles. She took another step forward, then another, forcing her legs to move, even as fear crept up her spine. The engine behind her turned over, not driving away, idling, waiting. That was when the man stepped in front of her. He came out of the darkness like he'd been standing there all along. Tall, broad, late 60s maybe. Grey hair pulled back at the nape of his neck. A leather jacket worn thin at the shoulders, creased from decades of use, not fashion. His eyes locked onto hers, sharp and assessing, missing nothing. "You're in danger," he said quietly. Not rushed, not loud. Certain. "Pretend I'm your dad, right now." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. He didn't wait for permission. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell motor oil and cold air on him. He lifted his hand and rested it lightly on her shoulder, the way a father might after a long day. Protective, familiar. A performance, but a convincing one. "There you are, sweetheart," he said, raising his voice just enough to carry. "I told you not to walk home this late." Behind them, a car door opened. Another closed. Footsteps scraped against gravel. Emily's heart slammed so hard it hurt. Head down, the man murmured without moving his lips. "Breathe slow. Let me talk." 2 men approached from the idling sedan. One thin, twitchy eyes darting. The other heavier hands shoved deep in his pockets, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. They stopped a few feet away, close enough for Emily to see the veins standing out on the thinner one's neck. "Evening," the heavier one said. "Didn't mean to interrupt family time." The man beside Emily didn't turn fully toward them. He shifted just enough to block her from view. Subtle, intentional. His posture changed weight, settling into his heels like someone preparing for impact. "Long night," he replied evenly. "My kid worked a double shift. I'm taking her home." The thin man laughed. Too sharp. Funny. She didn't look like she had a ride. Silence stretched. The streetlight buzzed overhead. Somewhere, down by the river, metal clanged as wind pushed against an old dock chain. The man's hand tightened slightly on Emily's shoulder. Not to restrain her, to steady her. "Go back to your car," he said, voice low edged with something cold. "You're done. Here." The heavier man's smile faltered. His eyes flicked to the jacket, to the patch stitched half hidden under the collar. Recognition sparked fast and unwanted. A beat passed, then another. Didn't realize the heavier man muttered, already stepping back. No offense. They retreated without another word. The sedan pulled away, tires hissing against damp asphalt, disappearing down the road as if it had never been there. Emily didn't realize she was shaking until her knees buckled. The man caught her before she fell, steadying her with surprising gentleness. "Easy," he said. "You're okay. It's done." She pulled away instinctively, back hitting the brick wall of a closed storefront. Her chest burned as she dragged in air. "Who are you?" she demanded. "How did you know?" He took a step back, giving her space. The hardness in his face eased, replaced by something heavier. Regret, maybe. Or memory. "My name's Jack Miller," he said, "and I've been gone from this town a long time. But not from its shadows." She stared at him, searching his face for threat, for deception. What she saw instead unsettled her more. Exhaustion. Purpose. The look of someone who'd made a decision long before tonight. "You shouldn't be walking alone anymore," he continued. "Not until things settle." What things, she snapped. "You don't get to say that and walk away." A pause. Jack glanced down the street, then back at her. "You ever hear your mother talk about Riverton before the factories closed?" Emily's stomach dropped. "Don't talk about my mother." "I knew your father," he said quietly. "Before he became a name nobody says out loud." The words hit harder than any threat. "You're wrong," Emily said, though doubt crept in fast and unwelcome. "My dad died when I was 3. Car accident." Jack nodded once. That's what the report had said. She stared at him, the street suddenly too open, too exposed. "You need to leave." "I will," he said. "For tonight." He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a small, folded card. He placed it on the ledge of the storefront window, then stepped back. "If you see that car again," he said, "or anyone asking questions about you, you call that number. Day or night." "I don't know you." "I know," Jack replied. "That's the problem." He turned and walked away, boots echoing softly against the pavement until the darkness swallowed him whole. Emily stood there long after he was gone, staring at the card, her heart still racing. When she finally reached her apartment, she locked the door, checked the windows, then checked them again. Her phone rang at 6 the next morning. "Emily," her mother said, the moment she answered, voice tight, breath shallow. "Did anything strange happen last night?" Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the card on her nightstand. Jack Miller. The name felt heavier now, like it carried weight she couldn't yet see. No, she lied. Nothing happened. On the other end of the line, Margaret Carter exhaled slowly, the sound thin and fragile. "Good," she said. "That's good." But even as she said it, Emily could hear the fear beneath the relief, the kind that didn't come from imagination, but from memory. Outside her window, a dark sedan rolled past the building, slow and deliberate, before disappearing around the corner. Emily didn't blink. She didn't move. Somewhere deep inside, something old had been stirred awake. Emily noticed the car again at 12:41 in the morning, parked across the street from the diner, with its lights off, engine silent. the windshield catching the glow of the neon sign like a blank stare. She didn't stop wiping the counter. She didn't look directly at it. She kept her shoulders loose, her movements ordinary. The way Jack's voice echoed in her head, telling her to move like you belong, even when you don't feel safe. Emily. Ruth called from the back, her voice raspy from decades of cigarette smoke and coffee. You good to lock up? Yeah, Emily answered, too fast. She slowed her breath, forced calm. Give me a minute. Ruth came out anyway. Late 60s apron, stained hair pulled tight, eyes sharper than people gave her credit for. She followed Emily's gaze without being obvious. Her mouth tightened. That car's been there before, Ruth said quietly. Not a question. Twice last week. Same spot. Emily's hands stilled. You noticed I noticed things, Ruth said. She reached for her purse, fingers digging until she found her keys. You want company tonight? Emily hesitated. Pride rose, then fell under the weight of the last 24 hours. Yeah, she said. I do. They stepped outside together. The night air was damp, heavy with river fog. The sedan didn't move. Ruth locked the door, slow and deliberate, then stood between Emily and the street, like it was nothing more than habit. You know, Ruth said back when this town was busy, cars like that meant trouble. Still do. Emily nodded, eyes forward. The sedan's engine started. Not fast, just enough to be heard. It pulled away as they walked, disappearing down Main. Ruth waited until it was gone before speaking again. Your mum still living over on Walnut? She asked. Yeah. Good woman, Ruth said. Scared, though. Always has been. Emily stopped. You know my mother? Ruth met her eyes. A pause. Something measured. Long time ago. Different town, different lives. Emily wanted to ask more, but Ruth shook her head once firm. Some things aren't mine to tell. They parted at the corner. Emily walked the rest of the way, alone, keys ready, heart steady, but alert. She locked her door behind her and leaned against it, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the distant river traffic, the building settling like an old man, shifting in his sleep. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it, thumb hovering, then answered. Emily Carter. Jack's voice said calm, controlled. You made it home. How did you get this number? She demanded. Your boss writes it on the shift board, he replied. In case something happens. That's not reassuring. No, he said. It isn't. She waited, anger and relief twisting together. Why are you watching me? I'm not watching, Jack said. I'm paying attention. There's a difference. Those men last night, Emily said. The car. This isn't random. No. Jack agreed. It's not. Silence stretched. She could hear his breathing slow and steady, like a man who knew how to wait. My mother sounded afraid this morning, Emily said. Not worried. Afraid. Jack didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower. Has she ever told you why you moved so much when you were a kid? Emily swallowed. She said she was looking for work. Jack exhaled. That's what she needed you to believe. You keep saying things like that, Emily said. And then you stop. Because it's not my place, he said. And because once you know, you can't unknow it. She closed her eyes. The image of the sedan flashed behind her lids. They're not done, she said. No, Jack replied. They're testing. Testing what? How close you are to being alone. Emily's jaw tightened. I'm not a child. I know, Jack said. That's what worries me. He gave her instructions then. Simple, practical, change routes, vary times, keep lights on, call if the car comes back. She hated how reasonable it all sounded. After the call, Emily sat at the small kitchen table until dawn crept through the blinds. When her mother called again at 7, sharp, Emily answered on the first ring. Did you sleep? Margaret asked. A little, Emily said. She studied her mother's voice, the way it shook under control. Mum, did you ever know someone named Jack Miller? Silence. Long enough to hear the hum of the line. No, Margaret said finally. Too quickly. Why? No reason Emily lied. Someone mentioned the name at work. Margaret's breath caught just slightly. You stay away from people like that, she said. Do you hear me? People like what Emily pressed. People who bring trouble. Margaret snapped, then softened. Please. Emily ended the call with a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. By afternoon, the town felt different. Too quiet. Too watchful. Emily caught the sedan again near the grocery store, idling by the loading dock. She ducked into the hardware store and stayed until it left. That night, she found her apartment door ajar. The chain hung loose. The lock wasn't broken, just turned. Inside, nothing was missing. No electronics. No cash. The couch cushions lay sliced open, neat and deliberate. Her father's old photograph from the bookshelf sat on the table, face down. Emily didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood there, heart pounding, understanding, settling cold in her chest. A message, not a robbery. Her phone rang. Jack. I'm coming, he said before she could speak. Pack a bag. You're not staying there tonight. I didn't call you, Emily said. I know, Jack replied. They did. She met him at the end of the block. He took in her shaking hands, the set of her jaw, the way she stood straighter than she felt. You didn't break, he said quietly. I don't have a choice, she replied. They drove out of town, past shuttered mills and rusted signs to a small house on the edge of the river, where Jack kept his tools and his silence. Inside the walls were bare, functional, no photos. You live like you're ready to leave, Emily said. Jack shrugged. Old habits. She sat on the couch, exhaustion crashing over her. Tell me one thing, she said. Just one. Are they after me because of my father? Jack looked at her, then really looked, the weight of years pressing into his face. They're after what your father wouldn't give them, he said, and what they think you still have. Emily's stomach dropped. I don't have anything. Jack's mouth tightened. That's what scares them. Outside, a car passed slow on the road. Jack stood, moved to the window, watching. His hand rested near his jacket, not threatening, just ready. Emily realized then that whatever had started on that street last night was bigger than fear. bigger than memory. It wasn't about the past staying buried. It was about who controlled the truth when it finally surfaced. Morning came without comfort. The river fog clung to the windows of Jack's house like it was waiting for permission to leave, turning the world outside into a blur of grey shapes and muted light. Emily woke on the couch with her muscles tight and her jaw clenched, the echo of last night still vibrating through her chest. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she smelled coffee. Strong. Bitter. Real. Jack stood at the counter, back to her shoulders, squared movements economical. He hadn't changed clothes. The leather jacket hung on the chair beside him like a second skin. He poured coffee into a chipped mug and set it down without looking back. "You slept," he said. "Not a question." "A little," Emily replied. Her voice sounded older than it had yesterday. She sat up, feet touching the cold floor. "They went through my apartment." "I know. You said they were testing," she said. "That wasn't testing. That was a warning." Jack turned then. His eyes were clear alert, but there was a heaviness behind them that hadn't been there the night before. "Testing stops when fear works," he said. "That didn't work on you." Emily wrapped her hands around the mug. The heat stung her palms, grounding her. "My mum can't know I stayed here." "She already knows something's wrong," Jack said. "She always does." As if summoned, Emily's phone buzzed on the table. Her mother's name filled the screen. Emily stared at it, then answered. "Emily." "Margaret," said. Breath tight. "You didn't come home." "I stayed with a friend," Emily replied. She watched Jack's reflection in the dark window as he listened without reacting. "My place got broken into." A sharp inhale on the other end. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Did you call the police?" Emily hesitated. Jack met her eyes and gave a small shake of his head. "Not yet." "No," Emily said. "Nothing was taken." "That's worse," Margaret whispered. "That's much worse." "Mum," Emily said gently. "You need to tell me what's going on." Silence. Long. Heavy. "I spent my life keeping you safe," Margaret said finally. "I'm not going to undo that now." The call ended before Emily could respond. Emily lowered the phone slowly. "She knows," she said. "She's just choosing not to say it." Jack nodded. That's how people survive things they shouldn't have. He drove Emily back into town after sunrise, taking a long route through side streets and back roads, doubling once, checking mirrors. The diner was already open. Ruth stood outside, smoking her eyes, narrowing when she saw the truck. "That him?" Ruth asked as Emily stepped out. "Yes," Emily said. Ruth studied Jack without apology. "About time," she muttered. Jack met her gaze. A flicker of recognition passed between them. "You're still here." "Someone had to stay," Ruth said. "Make sure the stories didn't rot." Inside the diner, the morning crowd was thin. Older men in work jackets, a couple of retired couples, lingering over coffee. Normal. Almost soothing. Emily tied her apron with steady hands. Halfway through the shift, the sedan passed by again. This time slower. This time close enough that Emily could see the driver's face. Not young. Weathered. eyes flat. He didn't look at the diner. He looked at her. Jack watched from across the street, leaning against the truck, pretending to study his phone. His posture changed by degrees. Controlled. Contained. The sedan didn't stop. It didn't need to. That afternoon, a uniformed officer came into the diner. Officer Ben Harris, late 50s, local, known. He ordered coffee, then leaned close to the counter. "You want to tell me why there's a report with your name on it?" he asked quietly. Emily's heart skipped. "What report?" "An anonymous tip," Harris said. "Said you might be connected to an ongoing federal inquiry." The room seemed to tilt. "Connected how?" Harris studied her face. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Jack appeared beside them without sound. "She's not involved in anything," he said calmly. "If you've got questions, ask me." Harris stiffened. "I didn't know you were back, Miller." "Wasn't sure you would," Jack replied. A long look passed between them. "History. Not friendly. I don't have grounds to hold anyone," Harris said finally. "But I'd be careful. Old names are coming up again." Jack nodded once. They always do. That night, Emily didn't go home. She stayed with her mother. Margaret's house smelled like lemon cleaner and old books, everything in its place. Controlled. Margaret moved through the kitchen like a woman bracing for impact. "They found you," Margaret said, not looking at Emily. "I knew they would someday." "Who, Emily?" asked. "Say it." Margaret's hands trembled as she set down a plate. "Men who don't forget. Men who don't forgive." Emily leaned forward. "Is Jack one of them?" Margaret closed her eyes. "Jack is the reason you're alive." The words landed heavy. "Then why are you afraid of him?" "Because he reminds me of what we lost," Margaret said, "and what I ran from." A knock at the door cut through the room like a gunshot. They froze. Jack's voice came through the wood. Calm. Firm. "Margaret, it's me." Margaret's face drained of color. She opened the door slowly. Jack stood on the porch, hat in hand, older than Emily had ever seen him. Smaller, somehow. "They're pushing," he said. "Faster than I expected." Margaret's voice shook. "I told you to stay away." "I did," Jack replied. "For 20 years. It didn't stop this." Emily watched them, the distance between them thick with unspoken history. "You both owe me the truth," she said. "Now." Jack exhaled. "Your father didn't die because he was careless," he said. "He died because he refused to hand something over. Something that didn't belong to them." Margaret looked at Emily, tears finally breaking free. "And they think you know where it is?" Emily's pulse roared in her ears. "I don't know anything." "That's the truth," Jack said. "But it won't matter to them." Outside, a car engine turned over, then another. Jack's gaze shifted to the window. "We don't have much time." Emily stood, fear burning into resolve. "Then stop protecting me from it," she said. "Teach me how to face it." Jack looked at her, really looked, seeing not the child she'd been, but the woman standing there now. His jaw tightened. "All right," he said. "But once we start, there's no stepping back." Emily nodded. Her hands were steady. Somewhere down the street, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed. The past was no longer content to stay buried, and for the first time, Emily understood that survival wasn't about hiding. It was about standing still long enough to be seen and strong enough not to break when you were. Jack started the lessons in the garage behind the house, the kind of place that smelled like rust oil and time. Sunlight cut through the high windows in pale slashes, dust drifting slowly like it had nowhere better to be. Emily stood on the concrete floor with her jacket off, sleeves rolled, heart steady, but alert. Jack closed the metal door with a dull thud that echoed longer than it should have. "This isn't about fighting," he said. "It's about seeing the moment before it turns bad." He moved without warning, stepping into her space fast enough to make her flinch. Emily sucked in a breath, instincts screaming to step back. Jack stopped inches from her face. "Too late," he said quietly. "You already lost that one." Her jaw tightened. Again. This time she watched his shoulders, not his eyes. When he shifted his weight, she pivoted, creating space instead of retreating. Jack nodded once. Approval, brief and unsentimental. "Good," he said. "You're learning to read bodies. That's how you stay alive." They worked until her arms shook and sweat dampened her hairline. Jack corrected her stance with a light touch, never lingering, always precise. He didn't praise much. When he did, it mattered. A truck slowed outside. Tires on gravel. Jack's head snapped up. He went still, listening. The sound passed. He relaxed by a fraction. Emily noticed. "You don't trust silence," she said. "I trust patterns," Jack replied. "Silence is just another pattern." That afternoon, Emily returned to the diner. Normal mattered. Jack insisted on it. Ruth watched from behind the counter as Emily poured coffee, her movements surer now, her eyes scanning reflections in the chrome. The sedan didn't come back, but the absence felt intentional. "You're different," Ruth said under her breath. "Whatever's circling you, it's not just noise." Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. After closing, Officer Harris waited outside. No uniform this time. Hands in pockets. Face careful. "You're making this harder," he said. Emily crossed her arms. "I didn't ask for any of it." Harris sighed. "Federal agents were here this morning. Asking about your father." Jack appeared at Emily's side like he'd been there the whole time. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," Harris said. "Which isn't much." Jack studied him. "And what are they telling you?" "That something old is moving," Harris replied. "And people who thought they were invisible aren't." Emily felt the weight of it settle in her chest. "Victor Romano," she said. Harris stiffened. "You shouldn't know that name." "But I do," Emily said. "And I know he's still pulling strings." Harris looked between her and Jack. "Be careful," he said. "This town doesn't survive another reckoning." That night, Margaret sat at the kitchen table with a stack of old documents, spread out like bones. Yellowed papers. Deeds. A safety deposit key taped inside a cookbook. Emily watched her mother's hands tremble as she sorted through them. I never touched these, Margaret said. I told myself the past would stay buried if I didn't look. Jack stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Burying things doesn't stop them from growing, he said. Margaret met his eyes, something like anger flashing there. You left, she said. You walked away. Jack didn't flinch. I did. And I've paid for it every day since. Emily placed a hand over the papers. Whatever they're after, she said, it's time we know what it is. Margaret nodded slowly. Your father kept records, she said. Names, transactions, proof. He planned to hand it over. To who, Emily asked. Margaret's voice dropped. To the government. Jack exhaled through his nose. That's why they killed him. The knock came hard, not polite, not patient. Jack moved first, guiding Emily behind him, without looking back. Margaret stood, frozen eyes wide. The door swung open before anyone reached it. Victor Romano stepped inside like he owned the air itself. Tall, lean, hair silvered, but eyes sharp. He smiled, slow and deliberate. Family reunions, Victor said, always messy. Emily felt her pulse spike, but held her ground. Victor's gaze slid to her, assessing amused. You look like him, he said. Stubborn. Jack's voice was iron. You don't get to be here. Victor chuckled. You never were good at setting boundaries. His eyes flicked to the papers on the table. We all know why I came. Emily stepped forward. You're done, she said. The truth is coming out. Victor's smile thinned. Truth is a currency, he replied. And I still have plenty. Jack shifted ready. Victor raised a hand. Relax. Not tonight. He backed toward the door, eyes never leaving Emily. Choices are coming, he said. Make the right one. When he was gone, the house felt smaller, colder. Margaret sank into a chair. I should have told you, she whispered. Emily knelt beside her. You're telling me now? Jack watched them, jaw tight. We move the records tomorrow, he said. Somewhere safe. Emily stood. No, she said. We bring them into the light. Jack studied her. That's dangerous. So is hiding. Emily replied. And I'm done with it. Jack nodded once. Respect. All right, he said. But we do it smart. Outside the river flowed on, indifferent. The town slept unaware that old ghosts had finally stepped back into the daylight, and this time they weren't being ignored. The morning broke sharp and clear, the kind of autumn day that looked honest, but hid cold beneath the light. Emily stood at the kitchen window, watching Jack load a metal toolbox into the back of his truck, each movement deliberate, controlled like he was bracing for impact long before it arrived. Margaret sat at the table behind her, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched, eyes fixed on nothing. We're not doing this alone, Emily said, without turning around. Jack shut the tailgate with a dull thump. I know. What does that mean? Margaret asked quietly. It means Jack said, as he came back inside, that the records your husband kept don't go to a locker or a hole in the ground. They go where they were meant to go. Federal hands. Margaret flinched. That didn't save him last time. No, Jack replied, but it might stop this from happening again. Emily looked between them. Officer Harris said agents were already asking questions. That means something's moving whether we like it or not. Margaret's fingers tightened around the mug. I built this life by staying quiet. And they found you anyway, Emily said gently. They found me. Silence settled heavy in the room. Margaret's shoulders sagged, decades of fear pressing down at once. All right, she whispered. No more hiding. They didn't go straight to the diner or the police station. Jack drove them south past the river bend, where the old mills leaned like tired men, to a storage facility that had been there longer than Emily had been alive. Unit number 3, 12. Jack unlocked it with a key that looked older than the door. Inside, the air was dry stale. Boxes stacked with care, labeled in her father's handwriting. Dates, names, codes Emily didn't recognize. Margaret touched one box like it might bite. He said if anything happened, she murmured, I was to give this key to a man who still believed in consequences. Jack's jaw clenched. He believed in you. They loaded what they could. Papers, ledgers. A small locked case Margaret hesitated over before handing it to Emily. This one stays with you, she said. Always. By the time they reached town again, the streets felt tighter, as if the buildings were leaning in to listen. The diner was closed. A sign taped to the door read, Closed for maintenance. Ruth stood across the street, arms crossed, cigarette, burning down, forgotten between her fingers. You're late, Ruth said as Jack parked. We had to be, Jack replied. Ruth eyed the boxes. You stirring things up. They were already stirring, Emily said. Ruth nodded once. Good. Took long enough. They didn't stay. Jack drove straight to the federal building 2 towns over, the one people pretended didn't exist until it mattered. Security was tighter than Emily expected. Cameras, guards, no friendliness. Jack gave a name at the desk. One that made the guard straighten. An agent met them in a small room that smelled like old paper and coffee. Agent Laura McKenna. Early 60s. Eyes sharp. Voice steady. She listened without interrupting as Jack spoke, as Margaret filled in the gaps, as Emily laid the locked case on the table. This corroborates things we couldn't prove, McKenna said, finally. If it's authentic. It is, Jack replied. I watched him write it. McKenna nodded. Then you've put yourselves in danger. We already, Emily said. McKenna's gaze flicked to her. You're braver than you know. Emily didn't answer. She was thinking about Victor's smile, about choices. They left with no promises, just instructions. Stay visible. Stay reachable. Don't confront anyone. Jack agreed to none of it out loud. The call came that night. Margaret answered. Her face drained of color as she listened. She handed the phone to Emily with shaking hands. You're moving too fast, Victor's voice said smoothly. That kind of recklessness gets people hurt. We're done talking, Emily replied. Her voice didn't shake. You don't own this anymore. A pause, then laughter. You always did sound like him. The line went dead. They didn't see the truck until it was too late. Red. Rusted. It came out of nowhere at the intersection, slamming into Jack's truck with bone-rattling force. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. Emily tasted blood. When the world stopped spinning, Jack was already moving, unbuckling, dragging Emily free as smoke curled into the night air. Margaret stumbled out the other side, sobbing but alive. Men spilled from the red truck. 3. Fast. Purposeful. Jack shoved Emily behind him. "Run," he ordered. "No," Emily said. She didn't run. The first man lunged. Jack took the hit, grunted, drove an elbow back. Another swung wide. Emily moved without thinking. Just like the garage. Just like Jack had drilled. She sidestepped and sommersault. And the man's momentum sent him sprawling. The third hesitated. Fear flickered. He hadn't expected resistance. Sirens wailed in the distance, closer than expected. Victor's men retreated, disappearing into the dark as quickly as they'd come. Jack sagged. Emily caught him, her hands slick with blood. "Stay with me," she said, voice breaking despite herself. He smiled faintly. "Told you," he rasped. "You're stronger than you think." Police arrived. Then ambulances. Flashing lights painted the street in harsh color. Margaret clutched Emily, shaking, crying alive. Jack was taken away on a stretcher, conscious but pale. Agent McKenna appeared out of nowhere, phone already pressed to her ear, voice clipped efficient. Victor didn't come back that night, or the next. Weeks passed. Investigations moved. Names fell. Assets froze. The town breathed cautiously. Jack recovered slowly. Scars stayed. Pain lingered. Consequences earned. Emily returned to the diner. Ruth hugged her without comment. Officer Harris nodded once, respectful. Margaret slept through the night for the first time in years. One evening, Emily stood by the river watching the water move on. Jack joined her, slower now, but still steady. "You could leave," she said. "Start over." Jack shook his head. "I already did that. This time, I'm staying." Emily smiled, small but real. Good. Somewhere behind them, the town hummed with ordinary life. The past hadn't vanished. It never did. But it had finally lost its grip, and for the first time that felt like enough. Emily learned the sound of recovery before she learned how to trust the quiet. It was the steady hiss of oxygen in Jack's hospital room, the measured beep of a monitor, keeping time, the low murmur of nurses changing shifts with practiced calm. She sat in the vinyl chair beside his bed, hands folded, eyes fixed on the rise and fall of his chest, like it was something she could will to continue. Jack woke just after noon. Not all at once. First a tightening of his jaw, then a breath that dragged, then his eyes opening to a thin line of light. He looked older there, smaller. The leather jacket was gone, replaced by a pale hospital gown that made his injuries impossible to hide. "You still here?" he said. Voice rough. "Where else would I be?" Emily replied. Her voice surprised her with how steady it sounded. He shifted, winced, then stilled. "How bad?" "Bad enough you're not going anywhere," she said. Not without complaining. A corner of his mouth lifted. It faded quickly. "They won't stop." "They already started stopping," Emily said. "You just couldn't see it." Margaret arrived an hour later with a paper bag of food she wouldn't eat and flowers she didn't know where to put. She stood at the foot of the bed, like she was bracing for an argument that never came. When Jack met her eyes, something old passed between them, sharp and unfinished. "I should have listened to you," Margaret said quietly. Jack shook his head, then regretted it. "You did what you had to." "So did you," she replied. Her voice broke on the last word. Outside the room, Agent McKenna waited with a file tucked under her arm and patience written into her posture. She spoke in measured sentences, never raising her voice, never wasting a word. Federal warrants, financial seizures, names Emily recognized and others she didn't. Victor Romano's reach was shrinking his allies, scattering as subpoenas landed. "He's not gone," McKenna said, "but he's cornered. Men like him don't disappear. They calcify." Emily nodded. "Then we stay visible." McKenna studied her. "That's not advice most people take." "I'm not most people anymore," Emily said. The town shifted around them as weeks passed. Riverton didn't heal loudly. It creaked and adjusted, a place too old for miracles, but willing to accept relief. The diner reopened. Ruth changed the sign back without ceremony. Regulars returned quieter than before, lingering longer. Emily worked mornings now. Her routine altered her awareness, sharpened. She noticed things she hadn't before. The way cars slowed when they passed, the way conversation stopped when she entered, then resumed with forced ease. She learned the difference between curiosity and caution. She learned that power didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it watched and waited. Jack came home thinner, moving slower, carrying pain like a private language. He didn't train her the way he had before. Instead, he talked about patterns, about leverage, about how fear spreads and how to stop feeding it. He showed her how to document, how to back up, how to make information heavier than threats. "This isn't strength," he said one evening, tapping a folder on the table. "This is weight. People who've lived off intimidation can't lift it." Emily absorbed it all, not as lessons, but as inheritance. She felt something change inside her, not hardening, but settling. A sense of position, of place. Margaret changed too. Slowly. She slept with the windows cracked now. She went to the grocery store without checking the parking lot twice. She stopped flinching at the sound of engines. When Emily caught her smiling at nothing, it felt like a victory neither of them named. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, the sky low and grey, the river thick with rain. Unknown number. Emily answered without hesitation. "You're doing well," Victor said, voice smooth, measured, as if he were calling to congratulate her. "You always did have good instincts." "I don't have time for you," Emily replied. "You have all the time," Victor said. "That's what you don't understand yet." She could hear the smile. She imagined him alone in some room that used to command attention, now reduced to shadows and screens. "You lost," she said. "You just haven't accepted it." A pause. Not anger. Amusement. "Loss is temporary," Victor said. "What you're carrying isn't." Emily leaned against the counter, eyes on the rain. "You mean my father's truth?" "I mean your father's reach," Victor replied. "He set things in motion he didn't live to see. Neither did I. Now it's your turn to choose what happens next." "I already did," Emily said. "I chose daylight. The line went dead. That night, a man showed up at the diner just before closing. Not threatening. Not familiar. He ordered coffee, drank it slow, then left a folded note beneath the cup. Emily waited until he was gone before opening it. It was an address, a warehouse by the river, an old one, decommissioned, scheduled for demolition. Jack read the note once, then again. "It's bait," he said. "Yes," Emily replied, "and it's public." Margaret's hands shook as she watched them plan. "You don't have to go." "We do," Emily said gently. "But we don't go alone." Agent McKenna agreed to be present at a distance with backup layered like a net. Officer Harris coordinated quietly, keeping local units ready without flashing lights. They moved with restraint, not force, understanding that Victor's last advantage was spectacle. The warehouse smelled like damp wood and rust. Floodlights washed the concrete in stark white. Emily walked in first, shoulders back, steps measured. Jack stayed behind the line, present, but not exposed. Victor waited near the center, hands open, posture relaxed. He looked smaller than she remembered, less inevitable. "You look well," he said. "So do you," Emily replied. "Considering." He laughed softly. "You've learned. That's good. That's what your father wanted." Emily stopped a few feet away. "You don't get to use his name." "I already did," Victor said. "For years." She held his gaze. "And now you don't." Siren sounded then, not close, but not distant either. Victor's eyes flicked, calculating. He exhaled a sound like relief. "This is where it ends," he said. "No," Emily replied. "This is where it's recorded." Agents stepped forward. Victor didn't resist. He didn't need to. His fight had always been elsewhere. As they led him away, Victor looked back once. "You carry him," he said. "Make it count." Emily didn't answer. She watched until he disappeared into the light. Afterward, the town slept easier. Not safe. Safer. Emily returned to the river, often standing where water moved without permission or regret. Jack joined her when he could, leaning on the rail, breathing deep. "You didn't become what they wanted," he said one evening. "I became what they couldn't control," Emily replied. Jack nodded. The lights of Riverton flickered on behind them, steady and imperfect. Emily felt the weight she carried settle into something else. Purpose, maybe. Or simply the knowledge that she could stand in the open now, unafraid of being seen. And that was a kind of power no one could take from her. The first morning after Victor Romano was taken, the town didn't wake up relieved. It woke up cautious, like someone opening their eyes after a long illness, unsure whether the pain would still be there. Emily felt it in the way the diner door hesitated before opening, in the way customers lowered their voices when they spoke her name, in the way people looked at her a second longer than before and then looked away. Ruth poured coffee without asking. She slid the mug across the counter, fingers brushing Emily's wrist, grounding. "You all right?" she asked. "I am," Emily said, and for the first time she meant it. The regulars nodded. No applause, no congratulations, just acknowledgement, which felt heavier and more honest. In towns like Riverton, survival wasn't celebrated. It was respected. Outside, Jack waited by the truck, leaning more than standing the brace, under his jacket doing most of the work. He watched the street the way he always did, not hunting for danger anymore, just noting its absence. "People are talking," Emily said as she joined him. "They always do when fear changes shape." Jack replied. "Used to whisper. Now they're trying to make sense of it. And you," she said, studying his face. "What are you trying to make sense of?" Jack took a slow breath. What comes next? That question followed her all day. It followed her home, where Margaret sat at the kitchen table with a stack of mail she hadn't opened yet, the late afternoon sun catching the silver in her hair. She looked up as Emily came in, searching her daughter's face, like she used to when Emily was a child, only now she didn't rush to speak. They called Margaret, said, "The bank, the lawyer, people who used to pretend we didn't exist." Emily set her bag down. And I told them to put everything in writing," Margaret said. A small smile flickered, surprised at itself. "Your father would have liked that." Emily sat across from her. "How are you holding up?" Margaret considered the question, really considered it. "I don't feel safe," she said. "But I don't feel hunted either. There's a difference." Emily reached for her hand. Margaret didn't pull away. That evening, Jack didn't go home. He stayed at the table with them, the three of them eating in quiet rhythm, the clink of silverware steady and real. It felt strange and right all at once, like fitting into a shape that had always been there but unused. After dinner, Jack stood wincing. "I should head out." Margaret looked up sharply. "You don't have to." Jack hesitated. Old instincts, old boundaries. Emily watched him struggle with it, saw the man who had learned to leave before he was asked. "Stay," Emily said simply. Jack nodded. He sat back down. News traveled faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, a reporter showed up at the diner. Not local, clean suit, polite smile. Emily declined the interview without drama. Ruth backed her up with a look that could peel paint. "You don't owe anyone a story," Ruth said later. "You lived it." Still, the attention came in other ways. A letter slid under the door with no return address. Not a threat, a thank you. Another followed, then another. Names Emily didn't recognize. Families who had been hurt, quietly, patiently waiting for someone else to speak first. She showed them to Jack. "This is the part nobody tells you about," he said. "When truth stops being abstract and starts knocking." "What do I do?" Emily asked. Jack looked at her. Really looked. "You decide how loud you want to be." The decision came sooner than she expected. Agent McKenna called on a Monday morning, her voice steady but direct. "There's a hearing, closed session. Your name came up." Emily's chest tightened. "As a witness, as context," McKenna replied. "You wouldn't have to testify, but your presence would matter." Emily stood in the quiet diner sunlight, stretching across empty booths. She thought of her father's handwriting on those boxes, of Margaret's years of silence, of Jack's scars. "I'll be there," she said. The building was colder than she expected. Not physically. Something else. Emily sat behind Jack and Margaret, hands folded, spine straight. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The documents did that for her. The patterns, the weight Jack had talked about. Victor wasn't there. He didn't need to be. His absence was its own testimony. When it was over, when doors closed and voices lowered, McKenna met Emily in the hallway. "You did well." "I didn't do anything," Emily replied. McKenna shook her head. "Exactly." The weeks that followed settled into something like normal. Jack sold the truck he'd used for years, bought a smaller one that didn't rattle when it stopped. He started taking on work again. Not security, not protection, repair, honest things, engines, tools, things that could be fixed. Margaret took a job at the library 3 days a week. She said it felt good to be surrounded by stories that didn't ask her to run. Emily enrolled in night classes at the community college. Writing, history, law basics. She didn't know where it would lead, only that it felt necessary. One evening, standing by the river again, Jack spoke without looking at her. "You don't need me the way you did." Emily smiled faintly. "I know." "That doesn't mean I'm leaving," he added. "I know that too." He shifted pain flashing across his face before he masked it. "Your father wanted you free, not protected." "Free?" Emily nodded. "You gave me that." Jack looked out at the water eyes, bright with something unshed. "I should have done more for him." Emily rested her arm against his. "You're doing it now." The town changed slowly, almost imperceptibly. New owners reopened one of the old mills. A community meeting filled the high school gym for the first time in years. People argued. People disagreed. People stayed. Emily watched it all with a clarity she hadn't known before. She wasn't invisible anymore, but she wasn't a symbol either. She was a woman who had stood where fear wanted her to kneel and chosen otherwise. On a quiet night, she found Jack in the garage, staring at an old photograph he hadn't shown her before. 2 young men, grease-stained hands, a grin she recognized instantly. "You kept this," she said. "I didn't think I deserved to throw it away." Jack replied. Emily took the photo, studied it, then set it back where it was. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Jack nodded once. He didn't trust his voice. Outside, Riverton settled into sleep, the river moving steady and unremarkable, carrying away what no longer belonged. Emily stood in the doorway of the garage, feeling the night air on her skin, aware of herself in a way that felt earned. She wasn't waiting for danger now. She was living in its aftermath, shaping something solid from the space it had left behind. The call came on a Sunday evening, when the town was quiet enough that even bad news felt louder. Emily was at the kitchen table with her books, spread out, highlighter uncapped, pretending to study, while her mind wandered back to the river, to the warehouse lights, to Victor's last look. Her phone buzzed once, then again. Unknown number. She answered on the second vibration. Emily Carter. Ms. Carter. A woman said, voice-controlled professional carrying distance. "This is Assistant United States Attorney Helen Brooks. I'm calling regarding the Romano case." Emily closed her notebook slowly. "I thought everything was finished." "It is moving," Brooks said. "That's not the same thing. We have a development and a concern." Emily leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "What kind of concern?" The kind that happens when people underestimate the cost of losing. Brooks replied, Mr. Romano has associates who are not indicted. Not yet. One of them has requested a meeting. With you. Emily's pulse quickened. Through you? Through us, Brooks confirmed. Public location. Recorded. Controlled. No surprises. Emily thought of Jack, of Margaret, of the months it had taken to feel the ground under her feet again. Why me? Because Brooks said you are the one thing he didn't account for. Emily agreed to the meeting before she could talk herself out of it. When she hung up, she sat still, listening to the house breathe. Then she stood and went to the garage. Jack was under the hood of an old pickup, hands blackened, shoulders tense, in a way she recognized immediately. He listened without interrupting as she explained, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. No, he said when she finished. Simple. Absolute. They're going to do it with or without me, Emily replied. This way it's monitored. Jack's jaw worked. That doesn't make it safe. It makes it visible, Emily said. That matters. Margaret stood in the doorway, having heard enough. You're not going alone, she said. I won't, Emily replied. I promise. The meeting was set for a coffee shop off the interstate neutral territory. Cameras everywhere. Emily arrived early, sat with her back to the wall, hands wrapped around a mug she didn't drink. Jack waited outside. Margaret stayed home, phone on lights on a quiet vigil she didn't announce. The man who approached her table was not what Emily expected. No leather, no swagger. He wore a pressed jacket and looked like he belonged behind a desk. Late 40s. Careful eyes. Ms. Carter, he said. Thank you for agreeing to speak. Say what you came to say, Emily replied. He sat folded his hands. Victor is not the end of this story. No, Emily said. He's the part that got caught. The man smiled faintly. You're sharp. That's why I'm here. Emily didn't return the smile. You're here because you're scared. The man paused. We believe in balance, he said. Victor upset that balance. You tipped it over. I didn't tip anything, Emily replied. I stopped lying. That has consequences, he said. For people who prefer quiet. Emily leaned forward. Threaten me plainly or leave. The man's eyes hardened. This doesn't have to continue. You can step away. Let the system do what it does. Emily shook her head. The system didn't protect my father. No, he said. But it will protect you now. If you let it. Emily sat back. You don't get to ask me for silence. The man stood, smoothing his jacket. Then understand this. Some losses don't forgive. Emily met his gaze unblinking. Neither do truths. He left without another word. Jack was at her side before she reached the door. You okay? Yes, Emily said. She meant it. Her hands were steady. The fallout wasn't immediate. It came in pieces, a car parked too long, a letter returned unopened, a business loan denied without explanation, pressure, subtle, legal, respectable. Emily felt it all and catalogued it without panic. She spoke to Brooks. she documented. She learned how power adapted when force failed. One night, as rain lashed the windows, Jack admitted what he hadn't said before. "There are people I can't reach," he said. "This world is bigger than me." Emily looked at him, seeing the weight in his eyes. "It doesn't have to be smaller for me to stand in it." He nodded, pride and fear colliding. Margaret surprised them both by speaking up. "I spent my life thinking survival meant shrinking," she said. "I was wrong." Emily squeezed her hand. "You did what you had to." And now Margaret said, "So will you." The pressure peaked when a local councilman called Emily into his office. He spoke about civic harmony, about letting wounds heal. Emily listened, then stood. "Heal means clean," she said. "Not covered." He didn't stop her from leaving. The night the windows rattled from a passing train, Emily realized something had shifted again. Not danger, expectation. People were watching to see if she would tire, retreat, soften. She didn't. Instead, she accepted an invitation to speak at the community center. Small crowd, folding chairs, no spotlight. She spoke about her father without naming names, about records and truth and the cost of silence. She didn't ask for applause. She got none. She got something else. People stayed after. They asked questions. They told stories they had never told out loud. Jack watched from the back, chest tight. "You're doing what he couldn't," he said later. Emily shook her head. "I'm doing what he started." The next morning, Brooks called again. The associate withdrew, she said. No meeting, no pressure. Emily closed her eyes. Why? Because, Brooks replied, the calculus changed. Visibility is expensive. Emily hung up and went outside. The river was high, moving fast, indifferent. She stood there, breathing, feeling the space inside her that fear used to occupy. She didn't feel victorious. She felt aligned. When she went back inside, Jack looked up from the table. What happened? They blinked, Emily said. Jack smiled, slow and genuine. Your father would have liked that. Emily poured coffee, sat down, opened her notebook. She wrote until the light changed, until the house felt warm again, until the weight of carrying the truth felt less like a burden and more like a choice she would keep making. Outside Riverton kept moving, imperfect and awake. Emily didn't need it to be safe forever. She needed it to be honest. The first real quiet came not as silence, but as routine. Emily noticed it on a Tuesday morning when the diner filled at its usual hour, the bell above the door ringing on time, the same men ordering the same breakfasts, the same jokes landing where they always had. Nothing paused when she walked in. No heads turned. No voices dipped. The town had decided without a meeting or a vote that the storm had passed. That decision carried its own weight. Emily poured coffee, wiped the counter, listened. She'd learned that calm could be deceptive, but this felt earned, not relief, acceptance, the kind that settled only after something had been faced and survived. Ruth leaned in from the grill. You got a minute? Later, she said. Not a question. After lunch, Emily replied. Jack spent his mornings in the garage. Now the door rolled halfway up, letting in light and neighbors who didn't knock. He worked slower than before, pausing when the pain flared, refusing help unless it was offered quietly. He'd learned something too. Staying meant letting people see the limits. A black sedan passed once, then didn't come back. Emily noted it without tension and returned to her work. In the afternoon, she walked to the river. The water was lower now, exposing rocks she hadn't seen in months. She stood on the bank and watched the current bend around them, reshaping itself without resistance. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed. "Agent McKenna," Emily answered, expecting another update, another caution. "It's winding down," McKenna said. "The hearings are nearly done. Asset recovery is moving. No surprises." "That's good," Emily replied. "It is," McKenna agreed. A pause. "There will be a final statement. Public record. Your father's name will be part of it." Emily closed her eyes. "I want to be there. You don't have to." "I know," Emily said. "I want to." Margaret insisted on coming too. She dressed carefully that morning, smoothing invisible wrinkles, hands steady but deliberate. Jack drove, gripping the wheel with both hands like he was reminding himself where he was. The room was smaller than Emily expected. No grand courtroom, no drama. Just wood microphones and a handful of people who understood the cost of what was being said. Names were read, dates confirmed. Patterns acknowledged. When her father's name came up, Emily didn't flinch. She held it. Let it exist in the open. Margaret reached for her hand, and Emily squeezed back. Afterward, no one approached them. No condolences. No praise. It wasn't that kind of ending. They walked out into daylight that felt unchanged, which was exactly the point. On the drive home, Jack spoke without taking his eyes off the road. He'd be relieved. Margaret nodded. He always said the truth didn't need an audience. That night, Emily found the old photograph again in the garage. The two young men, grease-stained, smiling without knowing what was coming. She studied it longer than before, then slid it into a simple frame and placed it on the shelf where Jack kept his tools. Jack watched, throat tight. "You sure?" "Yes," Emily said. "He doesn't belong in a box." The invitation came the following week, printed on plain paper slipped under the diner door. Community meeting, topic redevelopment. Emily almost laughed. The town was ready to talk about the future now that the past had loosened its grip. She went. Jack sat beside her. Margaret 2 rows back. People spoke, argued, disagreed loudly, then listened anyway. Emily didn't speak until near the end, when the room had tired itself out. "We can't pretend nothing happened," she said, standing. "But we don't have to live there forever." No applause, just nods. It was enough. Later, walking home under streetlights that buzzed less than they used to, Jack slowed, breath-catching. Emily matched his pace without comment. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But not to escape." Jack smiled faintly. "That's the difference." The diner closed early that night. Ruth locked the door and leaned against it, lighting a cigarette she didn't finish. "You did good," she said. "Your dad, too." Emily absorbed the words, let them settle where fear once lived. At home, Margaret slept with the window open. The sound of the river drifted in, steady and unconcerned. Emily sat at the table and wrote until her hand cramped, not because she had to, but because she wanted to remember how it felt to choose. The last call came near midnight. Unknown number. Emily answered without hesitation. "It's over," a man said. "Not Victor. Someone else." Tired. "You won." Emily closed her eyes. "This isn't about winning." A pause. Then the line went dead. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter. Resolution, maybe. Or simply the absence of being pulled in a dozen directions at once. Weeks passed. The town settled into new habits, a reopened storefront, a repaired bridge, ordinary changes that meant more than they looked like they should. One evening, Emily stood by the river with Jack and Margaret, the sky bruised purple as the sun dropped low. Jack leaned on the railing. Margaret tucked her coat tighter. "You okay?" Margaret asked Emily. Emily nodded. "I am." Jack glanced at her eyes, soft but sharp. "You didn't disappear." "I didn't want to," Emily replied. "I wanted to be seen and stay." Jack let out a breath he'd been holding for years. The water moved on, carrying reflections of streetlights and stars alike, refusing to distinguish between them. Emily watched until the first chill crept in, then turned back toward home, toward a life that didn't need hiding or heroics to feel real. The danger had passed, not because it had been erased, but because it had been faced named and set in its proper place. And for the first time, Emily felt the future not as a threat, but as an open stretch of road she could walk at her own pace, eyes forward, unafraid of what might follow. The last shift at the diner ended the way most honest things did, without ceremony. Emily wiped down the counter, flipped the sign to closed, and stood for a moment listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Outside Riverton breathed in the cool night air. The river steadied the streets familiar again. Not perfect, just real. Ruth counted the register and slid it into the safe. "You're different," she said, not looking up. "In a good way." Emily smiled. "So are you." Ruth snorted the sound, softening into something like pride. "Maybe. Or maybe the town finally caught up." Emily stepped outside and locked the door. The neon flickered once, then steadied. Jack waited by the truck, leaning less these days, his posture still careful but confident. He handed her a paper cup. Coffee. Black. Exactly how she liked it now. "Walk," he said. They did. Down Main, past the hardware store, with new lights in the window. Past the old mill, where a banner promised jobs coming soon. Ordinary promises, the kind that only mattered because people intended to keep them. At the river they stopped. The water reflected the street lights in broken lines, moving on without apology. Jack rested his forearms on the rail and breathed in deep. "You know," he said, "I spent a long time thinking the best thing I could do was disappear." Emily watched the current. "You did what you knew how to do." "Doesn't mean it was right," Jack said. Emily turned to him. "You stayed when it counted. You paid the price. That's not disappearing." Jack nodded once. The weight he carried looked lighter now, not gone, just balanced. "I'm opening the garage full-time," he said. "Small jobs, Honest work. That suits you, Emily replied. They stood there until the air cooled their hands. When they turned back, the house on Walnut was lit a warm square of yellow in the dark. Margaret waited at the table with a stack of papers, neatly arranged glasses perched on her nose. She looked up and smiled, a real one, the kind that reached her eyes without hesitation. I finished the filing, Margaret said, and I signed up for the book club at the library. Emily laughed quietly. Look at you. Margaret folded her hands. I spent years thinking safety meant silence. I was wrong. Jack took a seat, careful but comfortable. It's a hard lesson. Margaret met his eyes. We're still here. That counts. Later, when the dishes were done and the house settled into its night sounds, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her notebook open. The pages were filled now. Not confessions, records, timelines, names and dates and the small truths that made big lies fall apart. She didn't write to accuse. She wrote to remember. Her phone buzzed once, a message from Agent McKenna. No updates, just a line that read, "Case closed. Thank you for standing." Emily set the phone down and closed the notebook. The feeling that followed wasn't triumph, it was alignment, the quiet certainty that came when the inside matched the outside. In the weeks that followed, Riverton did what towns always did after storms. It repaired, slowly. A bridge reopened, a storefront painted its door. A meeting filled the gym and ended without shouting. Emily attended classes at night, her days full and purposeful. She spoke when it mattered. She listened when it didn't. Jack's garage opened with no ribbon cutting. People came anyway. Engines ran better. Tools found their places. Trust returned by degrees. Margaret took her walks in the morning, now nodding to neighbors stopping to talk. She slept with the window open, the river a lullaby instead of a warning. One evening, Emily framed a new photograph and set it on the shelf. Not the old one, a new one. The three of them by the river jackets, zipped faces, turned toward the light. Jack didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Standing at the water again, Emily felt the last tightness loosen. The danger had not vanished. It never did. But it had been faced, named, recorded, and set down. In its place was something sturdier than fear. Choice. She walked home under steady streetlights, keys loose in her hand, shoulders relaxed. The road ahead wasn't empty or promised. It was simply open, and that was enough. If this story stayed with you, walk with us a little longer. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts by commenting these 3 words. Tell your story